It's the Boris Dirk podcast. We are back after a long hiatus. I did some traveling in Europe. Drew just got back from his own overseas travel in Europe as well. Last time any of our listeners heard from us was during our draft live stream, attended by over 100 X users per X's own data. And we appreciate everyone who listened. We had a lot of fun hosting what was a marathon of a draft live stream, but we're out of draft season. We're past summer league. We're going to touch on that a little bit. And we are firmly in the NBA offseason now. A little USA basketball going on, but we're back. We're refreshed. We're ready to start looking ahead to the next season, go through some offseason winners and losers. Some people are stepping down from their jobs for going into next year, but we are not. We are here and ready to keep going through it all. So, Drew, how you doing?
Good, man. Been itching to get back into it. Twitter's been doing really well, and I just kind of want to ride that momentum. The draft stuff was so fun. Seeing your guys in Summer League perform. Yeah, excited to get into off-season winners and losers here. Ironically, I think a lot of my winners are teams that made deals with my losers, and I'm interested to hear your perspective on both sides of that coin because we agreed a few hours ago that we would talk about five teams each. I said, three winners, two losers, or vice versa.
Yeah.
And just going through it, there are like nine teams I want to talk about. It hasn't been the most splashy off season, like 5 years ago or so, the Paul George summer, the Woj bomb of all Woj bombs, but there have been a lot of smaller deals that I think really are going to change the playoff outlooks for a bunch of different teams for
Yeah.
good and bad. So yeah, let's get into it.
Absolutely. Well, we can start very quickly with Summer League as little amuse bouche. Um, Everyone knows the rules with Summer League. To quote Ryan Russillo, it only matters if it reinforces your existing opinion about a player. So, some guys who my conviction has been strengthened about them through these initial Summer League games. The list has to start with Reed Shepherd, who I think, based on his age, has been the single most impressive player from Summer League this year. Just scoring at will, getting to all of his spots. The jumper looks just as good as you'd hope, even though the three actually he didn't shoot super well, but the mid-range jumper looks great. He's getting to the rim more than he did in college, which, NBA spacing makes a big difference, especially Summer League, more up and down game. And the defense is translating. He's getting a ton of steals, some blocks, and yeah, overall has just looked amazing. So feeling good that I had him at number 2 on my board, and he looks like he could be a real steal for the Rockets going forward if Summer League means anything.
Yeah, I'm really struck this year just by how clear it is that the best processing prospects, like the best court mappers, the guys who make the quickest decisions, even if they aren't elite NBA athletes, really pop with NBA space. Reed, Kolek, Jalen Tyson for Cleveland, guys that can make sharp, quick passes and know how to put their teammates in positions to succeed. Just look like they're playing with more freedom. They even look more athletic because they can get to their spots with more ease. Exciting times for Reed. I think you and I both had him at 2. I had Steph Castle 1. You had Ron Holland 1, but we both loved Reed. And obviously, at the top, when you got a guy we had 2 at 3, like that's a big win. And so we expected greatness from Reed Shepherd, but it's just looked so good. And it's always different when you see it. I could have told you I expected Reed Shepherd to dominate Summer League, but seeing it in real time against NBA athletes, it's exciting stuff. And he fits right into the Rockets lineup that he has yet to play with too. So it's like he's looked amazing as the dude in a high usage Summer League role. And I think he's also a perfect fit with everything they have going on their varsity team.
Yeah, the Reed Shepherd, Amen Thompson is just such a fun,
Yeah.
back to back top
Yin
five
and
picks.
yang. Yeah.
Yeah. And to get them in back to back drafts, that's such a fun backcourt because they can both play on the ball. Amen is just his one weakness is he can't shoot, which is Reed's one of the better shooting prospects that we've seen in recent years. And they're both defensive playmakers. They're both really good passing. They're both just really high IQ players. So that could be a really interesting backcourt of the future for the team. And you need a guy like Reed next to Amen Thompson, just because Amen really projects as like, if he becomes an average shooter, that's like an amazing outcome. More likely he's going to be a below average shooter for his career, but he's so athletic and he's such a good processor that you hope he can overcome that. But yeah,
Yeah.
love how he's looked. You mentioned Tyler Kolek. Numbers don't jump off the page, but was probably the best like processor and playmaker that I saw at Summer League, just like making every pass. I think a 5-to-1 assist to turnover ratio, which like, who's tracking assist to turnover ratio in Summer League, but still better than the opposite. And then you mentioned Jalen Tyson, who I was really happy. I moved him up to number 9 at the last minute on my board. Forward out of Cal, like 6'7", sneaky high ceiling for a guy who is 21 already, because he's just kind of growing into himself as like a 3-level scorer and playmaker. But he's a guy who was a defensive specialist early in his college career and then transferred to Cal and was like their entire offense there, and has just been really refining his scoring game. And for Cleveland to get him at 20, I think he's got a decently high ceiling, and at the very least can be a really solid role player for them going forward. So he's been really good.
Yeah, and I moved Jalen Tyson down a little bit at the very end of the draft cycle, pre-draft. Still had him at 14. He goes at 23, so obviously I'm a huge fan of that pick. But I just think draft groupthink is so weird. Like, because in a bad draft, how does a guy like that go 23?
Yeah.
And I'm not overreacting to the summer league tape. Like, you and I both loved him. In a vacuum, if you just showed me that guy's college tape and said he goes 23, I'd be like, oh, it's a pretty awesome draft, I guess.
Yeah.
His ceiling is just really rare for a 21-year-old college player, because of the way he leverages his above average athleticism, and just his shot making ability. And he had a lot of sloppy turnovers because he had a massive usage at Cal, like you said, the epicenter of everything that happened on offense. But scaling down already a little bit for his summer league team, you just see all of the weapons he brings to the table, and also trims some of the fat, that inevitably you have when you give a guy the ball on every single possession, as they did at Cal. So yeah, Cleveland got a good one, and it's been a weird couple of years for Cleveland, and maybe this injects some new life into the organization because they've been looking for wings.
Yeah.
That's bit they've had great big men and really good guard play, and everything between that has been a question mark, whether it's been Okoro, who gives you a lot on defense and is left, in the corner in the playoffs on offense. Niang, who's kind of an up and down defender, doesn't move that well, but can hit threes. Dean Wade, who's kind of will plug any hole your roster needs, but should not be playing 30 minutes per game on a playoff team, at least yet
Mm-hmm.
in his career. So Karis LeVert, who's, demands the ball a lot for a guy who's not going to be like one of your 4 best players.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's been a weird wing group for Cleveland, and I think they have a starter. I think he's going to be ready to start pretty soon. I
Yeah.
hope that's not an overreaction. I just love the energy he brings. I love what he can do for your team's pace. The handle at 6'7" is really impressive.
Yeah. And then they've got Strus too, but he's like 6'5". He's not really a
Yeah,
pure wing. So yeah. And then the last guy I wanted to mention in terms of strengthening my convictions is Tristan Da Silva, who I believe set the all-time PER record for Summer League.
it's
Again,
up there.
who's tracking this, but yeah, he just looks so ready. It was so clear, like immediately he's too good to be playing in Summer League. Like, I mean, he's 23, so you'd expect that. Like, it's not as impressive for a 23-year-old to look like that as opposed to someone like Reed Shepard, who's 19 or 20. But Da Silva, he immediately flashed. I mean, the shooting, he's going to be such a pure shooter, passing, secondary playmaking, size, fluidity. A lot of people knock his defense. I think he's going to be a pretty solid defender. Like, I really like his team defense, and I don't think he's a liability on the ball in the way that some have painted him. And yeah, he's just going to fit in really well in Orlando. They're already calling him Bronze Wagner. There's a lot of nicknames flying around. Da Silva Surfer is another one that's flying around
Is it is it
Orlando.
is it white dudes from Orlando calling him Bronze Wagner?
I think so.
Great. Thanks, Rudy. I think I had Tristan at 13 on my board, right above Tyson. So
Yeah.
obviously I love that they got him at 18. if you told me your team needed a guy who doesn't dribble much, but can kind of provide all of the secondary skills that you need in the modern NBA, shooting, quick passing, good wing defense, size, like Tristan would have been higher than 13 on my board if I were the Orlando Magic.
Yeah.
And they just need dudes who don't need the ball, because they have their creators. And the way that Paolo Banchero demands help, just with his size, handle, explosiveness combo, and his craft, because I think he has really underrated craft, especially in the mid range. Life's going to be easy for Tristan da Silva, and it's just amazing for them to get a big shooter in the mix who can also, like you said, do some good work on defense.
Absolutely. Any other guys you wanted to shout out from Summer League?
Bob Carrington, Adam Mares, on the Tim Legler podcast. I forget what they call All NBA podcast, which I recently started listening to. Adam Mares broke my heart. Legler's co-host, repeatedly calling Bob Carrington a Blazer because technically it was the Blazers pick. The Blazers took him at 14 in quotes and then traded him to the Washington Wizards. So seeing Bob Carrington in a Blazers hat is an image that will haunt me for a decade, I think. But he's been fucking awesome. Averaged what was 7 rebounds and 6 assists, and the scoring was there, 3 levels. He looks like he's already taken a massive step physically just in the last couple months. He doesn't look like the really green, late growth spurt, immature body that we saw at Pitt. He
Yeah.
already looks more cut, more toned. And he has like Jamal Murray type size at the point guard position. So if you just brought someone from outer space and said the Wizards had the number 2 pick and the number 14 pick, they would totally guess from this summer league tape that Bub was taking number 2 and Alex Sarr was taking number 14. That's not a knock on Sarr. Like, Sarr showed a lot on defense. The shooting numbers are abysmal, but we all knew the offense would be a work in progress. That's why I think you and I were a little bit lower on him than consensus. But I think the Wizards have their point guard of the future. And when you get that at the end of the lottery, you've done an awesome job.
Yeah. I mean, you could say Keyshawn George might have been picked before Alex Sarr too, but
I forgot I left the door open for you there. But yeah, so amazing Bub Carrington. I had him at 8 on my board, and I'm very proud of it at this moment. So I welcome all the overreactions. Just to go back to the Rockets for a second, I just wanted to point out how I think if you asked like 100 different people who they think the best young prospect is on the Rockets, you might get like 7 different answers. And I think that's a great thing. It's going to be really interesting this year to see like who rises above the fray. We know Alperen Şengün is a brilliantly creative offensive player. There are some questions about the defense, just as there were with the young Jokic. I don't think Şengün is on his way to being Jokic because Jokic is already kind of like a top 10 player of all time. But it could be Şengün. Jabari Smith could continue to grow. I mean, I had Jabari number 1 in his class, and obviously I'm sweating that one out, but I still think he's going to end up being a better playoff player than he is a regular season player.
Mhm.
And I think he's an insane worker. There were videos that surfaced of Jabari shooting around with KD. I think they've been working out together. I'm sure KD sees a lot of himself in this, 6'11", 6'10", incredibly fluid shooter. And Jalen Green still has a really high ceiling. If he can put in enough effort on defense, like he has offensive traits that are very hard to find. And just like the shooting athleticism combo is rare. Reed Shepherd is now in the mix. Cam Whitmore is one of the best athletes in the NBA. Amen Thompson, one of the most thrilling like ball handlers going downhill, and just very few guys with his dimensions have that combination of athleticism and passing feel. So
Yeah,
yeah, it's an incredibly interesting time in Houston, and I love that Ime Udoka is the guy to try to put all the puzzle pieces together. So they're
absolutely.
gonna be one of my favorite teams to watch this year, no doubt.
For sure. And then finally with Summer League, 2 guys who I'm by no means wobbling on my pre-draft stance on them, but they did catch my attention of like, I'm gonna have to watch some preseason footage to see if it looks as good as it's looked in Summer League because it's a little bad for my draft takes so far. But Matas Buzelis has looked really impressive in Summer League so far. Like the athleticism really pops, the ball handling as well. And then Khalil Ware on Miami has put up really big numbers, and he's someone who I was just completely out on because of his college tape. I thought he was really disengaged. I thought he was low motor. I thought he made a lot of bad decisions, but he's put up big numbers at Summer League. Might not mean anything, but he's caught my attention to the point where now I'm going to need to monitor him more closely at the start of the season to see just how he looks.
You've said in the past you think athleticism evaluation is maybe one of your weaker spots. I don't know if you're still feeling that way,
Yes.
but one of the things that I was fighting for or with Matas is just I think he's a pogo stick 6'10" athlete. Um, and you can mold those guys. And, Jeremy Grant coming out of Syracuse was a very similar profile. Like guys who play hard and have that basic frame, athleticism, like defensive help IQ, like they often develop an offensive skill set far superior to what we could even imagine. So
Yeah.
I wasn't a Matas super fan. I had him at 11. I think he got picked at 11 by Chicago. But it's nice to see those flashes, especially in transition. I'm really sad Devin Carter didn't get a chance to play in summer league and might be out for a really long time with a torn labrum. I had him at number 6, and I thought that was a phenomenal pick for the Kings at 13. I think is where they got him. There have been some awesome flashes from Dalton Connect. You and I both had him in our top 10, I believe. So I couldn't believe that he fell to 17. I thought that was really, really crazy. Bacome Dadier, showed some defensive flashes for the Knicks, which is interesting because defense was kind of my number one concern with him, at least early on,
Mhm.
despite the frame. But Bacome plays really hard. I just like that he's 18 and you could feel him in summer league games.
Yeah, last thought on the on summer league and the draft is it was widely reported as a really weak draft, which I think at the top is true, but I do think it's a class that's very deep with solid role players, rotation guys, and like starter level guys. So I would not be surprised if like a couple months into the season, there's a lot of rookies who are making immediate impacts for their teams, and you see a lot of people being like, oh, this draft class like isn't so bad. Everyone said it would be terrible, and there's guys who are like real contributors right away.
Yeah. And lastly, just let me cash my Steph Castle check. Like this dude is a hooper's hooper. He just is. His cadence on offense is unique. He has a knack for getting into the paint. I love the Drew Holiday comp. He kind of even has like more patience and more confidence on ball than I feel like a young Drew did. And then AJ Mitchell, who you and I both loved. I think he went 37 to OKC.
Yeah.
We both had him in our top 20, and he just looked like a 12-year pro at the very least. So OKC continues to win in almost every way possible.
Absolutely.
Long live summer league. I hope it never goes away. It pisses me off when I see guys saying X is too good for summer league. Why is Reed Shepherd still playing in summer league? It doesn't make any sense. Like, are we just going to live in the neurotic world where like every minute a guy plays basketball adds like a 0.0001 chance that like he has a chronic injury?
Yeah.
I I just like watching guys play and I like watching guys compete, especially against NBA athletes when we haven't seen it before. And
You're
I don't know. That rhetoric really pisses me off. Like, let Reed
yeah.
Shepherd play and dominate all of summer league. The fans love it. He loves it. He wants to be there. So let it happen.
Yeah, you're more likely to get injured at like a pro am or like a Rico Hines pickup run
Exactly.
than you are in summer league. Like it's not intense basketball.
Yeah.
All right. Speaking of the OKC Thunder winning in staying winning in like every sense of NBA life. Offseason winners and losers. We've each prepared a list of some of our favorite off seasons and least favorite off seasons, and we can just kind of go through as many as we have time for. Drew, I don't know if you have one that you feel very strongly about wanting to start with. I can let you go first.
Let's just get the Knicks out of the way.
Give it to me.
The Knicks draft drastically altered my perception of the Bridges trade because just 5 first round picks for Bridges, in my head, you just think the Knicks have no future. It's, they better make a finals in the next couple of years because the future is fully mortgaged. And then they go into the draft and they get 3 players I absolutely love. I mean, I had a first round grade on Kevin McCullough. I had a top 9 grade on Bacome Dadier. Did I end up? Yeah, I ended up with Kolek at 35, but like still fully believe that he's a backup point guard in the NBA for a decade. So Yeah, the Knicks draft was phenomenal. And Kevin McCullough's been injured, so he's kind of been out of the spotlight. But I think that guy is going to be a rotation player for a long time as well. So obviously they get Bridges, they get the Brunson discount so that they can continue to build at least in the short term. The Celtics will be my pick out of the East now. They have the championship equity, but I think the Knicks can push them in a series. I really do. And I'm always going to side with the team that gets the awesome player for the picks. Like Brooklyn got a great deal. They should all be ecstatic that they have a war chest of picks now and they get off the guy who clearly didn't want to be there. But they also are going to suck for a while. And my Blazers have sucked for like 5 years, and it's drastically changed my idea of like tanking is no fun.
I agree. Outside of, I mean, I think Boston and OKC are like the two top contenders in the NBA. And then after that, I think the Knicks have as good of a shot as anyone. Um, they're probably the team in the league that outside of OKC, team in the East, I'll say, that matches up the best with Boston defensively. And they're going for the Celtics formula as far as the champion, trying to construct a championship team. They have I think, a top 10 player in Jalen Brunson. I think even the most Brunson hater would say like maybe top 20, but I think top 10 pretty unarguably. Really high end depth. Like they might be the deepest team in the league if you're talking 1 to 9, 1 to 8. Uh, Best wing defense duo in the NBA probably with Bridges and OG. Two-way players up and down the roster, and just outside of Brunson, just positional size everywhere. And if it's not positional size, it's guys who play bigger than they are, like Josh Hart and DiVincenzo. Um, they still need a backup center, especially with Mitchell Robinson's injury history, but luckily that's one of the easier positions to find in the NBA. And just their team now has so much flexibility. Like they can run a lineup out. They're probably going to start for now Brunson, Bridges, Anunoby, Randall, and Robinson, and just see how Randall looks with the team early on. He looked really good when they first traded for OG last year, so they're going to have to see if that carries over. But they can go Brunson in shooting with him next to Dante, OG, McHale, and a center. They can go Brunson in defense if you swap Josh Hart in there and it's McHale, OG, Josh Hart. They can go small with Randall at the 5, which I think is actually something we'll see quite a bit of, especially with them lacking a backup center where you throw out Brunson, DiVincenzo, Bridges, Anunoby, and Randall. And there's enough aggregate size there, I think, that you can overcome not having that rim protector. And just the rim defense trio of McHale, OG, and Hart, when they throw that out there, is just going to be like so much fun to watch. I think they're going to be an elite defense. Brunson has been enough to carry their offense in the past, and gives them more shooting, more space. And yeah, if they can just find a serviceable backup big, which they really only need against like, Philadelphia and a few teams in the NBA. Like you don't need an elite center against all the teams in the NBA. I assume they'll bring back Precious Achiuwa if they can't find anyone else, and he gives them another look. But I just think it's such a deep team. They're going to be a really high level defensive team. The chemistry is going to be like through the roof. The only thing I worry about is like guys feeling like they're not playing enough. I think the anti-Tibbs Mafia is going to be pretty quiet when everyone on this team is playing like under 35 minutes a game just because they have so many bodies. Like Josh Hart is going to be playing, in the 20s for minutes. He's not going to be playing close to 40 like he was for large portions of last season. So
Yeah.
they're flexible. They gave up a lot of picks, but they didn't give up a single rotation player really in that trade for Bridges. And we saw in the draft, like this front office is also elite at like tinkering on the margins and turning, picks 24, and I forget what they had. It was like 24 and 36 that they went into the draft with, and then they ended up with like three second round picks, still a first round pick. They saved money, they got more future assets. They're just really elite at that kind of like around the margins tinkering, and it's been
Yeah.
a hallmark of the front office since they took over in 2020. So yeah, I just have so much faith in this front office, and yeah, it's going to be a really good team. There's like a clear top 4 in the East, I think, and they're firmly in that. And I think they match up with Boston, as I said, as well as anyone in the NBA does.
I think they went into the draft with two late first, right? Back to back, 24 and 25. I might be wrong, but
Yeah.
yeah. but whatever. They, yeah,
That's right. That's right.
they've done wonderful tinkering for sure. And I have them as a firm winner. I think I would give them an A plus if they had found a way to trade Randall for what Knicks fans would perceive as not enough to make space to keep Hardenstein. Because I'm not a Randall guy, and I just think Hardenstein was a top 50 player in the league last year and way more important. And I'm not saying Randall has no value. I just think Hardenstein is a way more valuable guy. And I think we're seeing in international basketball right now that perhaps we overrate offensive firepower a little bit and underrate just nonstop, consistent, competitive will. And that's Isaiah Hardenstein in a nutshell. And Julius Randle's commitment to winning has ebbed and flowed over the years, even though he was amazing last year when healthy. All right, we got to get off the Knicks, or we're going to
Yeah.
go for 4 hours. Let's just go quickly through the Sixers. I have them as a winner.
Hmm.
It's just whatever you think of Embiid right now, because the internet does not like Embiid. I don't like Embiid. He's one of the least likable Team USA players I've ever seen. It's just an undeniably awesome summer for them. Bringing Paul George into cap space, losing Tobias Harris, who's had a complicated relationship with that team and that city.
Putting
Um,
it mildly.
Making almost 40 million the last couple of years. He's finally in Detroit. You bring Paul George into cap space, you get Caleb Martin on a team friendly deal. You might not buy into Embiid as the number one guy on a real contender. I'm not sure I do at this point. I said after the incredible Maxey shot in what was it, game 2 of the series, or was it game 4? I don't remember. But like the logo runner from Maxey in round 1 this year. I After that game, we recorded, and I said game 5. Yeah. I thought Maxey was the new face of the Sixers and their best player. And I'm standing by it. It's just like body language, energy, competitiveness, like all of this stuff matters a lot. So I have questions about Embiid leading a team deep into the playoffs, but the Sixers got a lot better this summer, and that's what we're grading here. So big win for Philadelphia.
For sure. Yeah. I mean, it's on paper, it's just like kind of a perfect fitting big three with Maxey, George, and Embiid. Paul George is a star who's really comfortable playing off the ball, as he showed playing off of Russ and OKC, and then in LA playing off of Harden and Kawhi. So yeah, he's big. He gives them, perimeter size, ball handling, another scoring threat. Also insurance so that Embiid can like play 50 games and they can still be like a firm top six playoff team in the East. Because Maxi, George, and role players is still a solid core. But their title chances are still going to come down to can Embiid make it through multiple rounds of the playoffs without sustaining an injury, which to this point he's never been able to make it through the second round at all, but to the second round without sustaining some sort of injury. And he's 30 now. He's going to turn 31 before the playoffs start. You don't expect that trend to get better as he gets older. So he's someone where they really might be kind of running out of runway as far as like how many playoff runs does he have in him, and can he just like get to the finish line in one of these. The Caleb Martin pickup was also good, getting him from Miami. I mean, he's going to be the starting power forward. You'd ideally like someone a little bit bigger there, or Paul George is going to be the starting power forward, whatever you want, however you want to slice it. But they also brought back Lowry and Oubre, who I thought were really good for them in the Knicks series, especially Lowry. Oubre gave them some good defense. Overall, yeah, aside from Embiid, it's not like the best overall passing basketball IQ team necessarily. And outside of Embiid, they're not like the most physical team. They're kind of, and even Embiid is not as physical as he should be for as big as he is, but they're more of like a finesse team. So you wonder a little bit how that holds up in the playoffs in certain circumstances. But yeah, there's no doubt they got better. They're firmly in the top four contenders in the East, which, they got better, but the teams around them also like either maintained or got better too. So yeah, they're a winner, but really the story will be told with how Embiid's health looks in May.
You lose Batum, the jack of all trades, who could play for any team in the playoffs. That one hurts a little bit. Buddy Hield barely played for them in the playoffs. I think they're fine losing him. Melton, I would have loved to keep because he's also kind of a Swiss Army knife combo guard. They did get Adem Bona of UCLA at number 41 in the draft, kind of like a pick the Knicks might have wanted to make. They got their physical sort of ready to play some NBA minutes defensively, backup center. And that he's another guy who's going to help take a little bit off Embiid's shoulders during the regular season because Embiid no longer needs to be the best regular season player. He no longer needs the MVP trophy. He needs to be healthy for several rounds of playoff basketball. And I
Yeah.
think that they've now built a situation around him where he has a better chance to be in great shape at the most important moments.
Yeah. Well, we can close out the top of the East, touch on Milwaukee quickly. I don't know if they were on your list of winners or
No,
losers.
they weren't on my list. I love the Gary Trent signing. That's huge for them. I think he's better than Malik Beasley. I don't think he's so much better than Malik Beasley that like they make the winners. They had a weird draft. They took two really unpolished young guys.
Yeah.
I understand swinging on upside, but Dame's clock is ticking. Chris Middleton's clock is ticking. Giannis has struggled to be healthy for playoff runs the last couple of years, and I just expected them to pick more of like the Adembonas, the Tyler Koleks, the Kevin McCullers of this draft. And interestingly, they went for AJ Johnson, who didn't even crack 10 minutes per game in the Australian League, and Tyler Smith, who's an awesome 6'10 shooter and athlete, but is a complete defensive mess right now. And
Yeah.
depending on how Doc Rivers is feeling, like might not be ready to play for a year or two. So interesting stuff in Milwaukee. I didn't have them on the winners or losers side.
Yeah, I had them as a mild winner just because of I like the Gary Trent pickup, but it's just the whole story with them is can Dame get back to being a top 15 player? Because if he can, they're a firm contender, and if he doesn't, they aren't. So that it really just boils down to
Yeah.
that.
All right, let's get into some more hipster ones, and we can run through some of these teams more quickly because I think we talked now about a couple of the splashier teams. First off, the Atlanta Hawks. I think they're a winner. I'm not picking the Hawks to win multiple playoff series, but I think we could get back to that more feisty, like you don't want to get them in round one type Hawks teams, surrounding Trae Young with more athleticism and shooting. He and DeJounte Murray were clearly not the best of pals a year or two into this experiment. And just straight up, I like Dyson Daniels more as an asset than DeJounte Murray. It was really good work by the Hawks in that deal to get Dyson Daniels, EJ Liddell, who I know you still have hope for, and
EJ?
just EJ Liddell was an awesome, awesome college player. We both really liked him in that draft. You liked him way more than I did, but I believe in him too. He just hasn't had a chance yet in the NBA. He tears his Achilles, struggles to break into the Pelicans rotation. He gets a fresh start in Atlanta. I hope it works out for him. They also get Larry Nance Jr., who's just a plug and play, awesome, versatile big. And then they got a 25 first rounder via the Lakers and a 2027 first round pick, which is going to be the less favorable of Bucks or Pelicans. Top four protected. It's just, I think it was an awesome deal for the Hawks. So I put them on my winner's side. And I think Dyson Daniels, like I was just saying, doesn't have the most offensive firepower, but you're seeing in his play for Australia that this dude is a dog. Has a chance to make an all defense team before his career is over. And if his shooting comes around, is just like a dial up, versatile, toolsy playoff wing who can guard
Yeah.
multiple positions and just lives for the physicality. Yeah, I'm a Dyson Daniels fan.
Yeah. Dyson Daniels just hit a game winner against France today in international
Oh
friendly
yeah, I
play.
didn't even see that.
Yeah. I mean, it was a backdoor cut for a layup, but still.
He also hit a really deep three in their last game. I saw that. But
Yes.
he's just been showing flashes coming into his own. He's still very young, so I think it was awesome work by Landry Fields. And it's weird that we're now getting to an age where guys like Landry Fields are running teams, and he hasn't had the best run for the Hawks so far as their GM, but I think he nailed it with this deal.
Yeah. Well, they did take Riza number one overall, so I don't know if
Oh
I can
yeah.
make them a winner just based on that. But yeah, I'm curious to see what they look like. You know, I love Jalen Johnson, but also I'm not positive this is a top 8 team in the East. Like they're going to be in that kind of 7 to 9 range probably, depending on how Miami looks and if any of Indiana, Orlando, or Cleveland see any regression this year. But the East, I think, has a fairly firm top 8, and the Hawks are kind of like knocking on the door of that. So we'll see. Maybe it's an addition by subtraction move, just reorienting the team around Trey again and trying to get a little bit more like versatile and deep overall,
Yeah.
but it still feels like they're trying to figure out exactly what their plan is going forward.
I like Dyson next to Trey more than I like DeJounte. Okay. How about for winners? I'm sure you had the Magic somewhere in there.
Yeah, I thought of them. I love
Yeah.
the KCP pickup for
Yeah.
them. They're going to be an elite defense, and he's a good offensive complement for them too as a shooter. So yeah, home run pickup.
I just am already seeing the like, the future podcast where Pella Bancaro says a huge part of what got him to like Hall of Fame status is that in his early career they brought in a guy like KCP and he just gave him some of the secrets to winning at the highest level. And
Yeah,
so even if you're more cynical about the Orlando really short term, like if you don't see them as a real contender in the East, which I think is very fair, I don't think they're there yet. Bringing in a guy like KCP is so great for Paolo and Franz and the other great young guys they have in there. I mean, for Anthony Black's growth, for Jalen Suggs' growth, bringing in these vets who have been there, who've been on championship teams, who play selfless team basketball, I think just can leave a really great lasting impression on your young core.
yeah. He feels kind of like the Danny Green of this generation a little bit, where he's like, I mean, Danny Green kind of bounced around from team to team, but was always just like a really key contributor and racked up 3 rings for 3 different teams in the process between San Antonio, the Raptors, and then the Lakers. KCP's already racked up 2 between the Lakers and the Nuggets. Like he's just the quintessential two-way shooting guard, and that is just Suggs, KCP, Wagner, Banchero, and Carter is just a hellacious defensive
Yeah.
lineup. So I'm excited to watch them.
They also re-signed Goga Batadze, who like has some leverage right now, or the Magic have leverage with him. A team like the Knicks like needs that guy, so I think
Yeah,
they're going to be able to get pieces back for him. They get Jonathan Isaac on a 5-year deal that I think any team that could afford it would make, just because of his upside as a defender with good catch and shoot ability. And Franz Wagner gets that massive max, rookie extension and I think he deserves it. There was a lot of noise. Bill Simmons said he thought it could be a massive overpay, as he said with Scotty Barnes as well. But I just think from this awesome draft, guys like Wagner, Barnes, Mobley, they've earned that 225 million. They just have. They've shown enough. And unless they have like a career changing injury, like I just expect all 3 of those guys to be worth the money. If it's an overpay, it's going to end up looking like a very slight overpay, but these are swings you take on young guys who have shown so much so early.
for sure. Last winner, real quick, was OKC. We talked about them
Oh
with the
yeah.
Caruso trade. They got Hartenstein too. Like they're just so versatile. I think they're
Yeah.
my favorite in the West. They might be my favorite in the whole league.
As big as the Hardenstein deal to me is the re-signings for OKC. Like they got Isaiah Joe and Aaron Wiggins on insanely fair deals, and especially as the TV money comes in, like I think it's gonna look better and better. Those 2 awesome role players are just overqualified for their roles, and you can't have too many of those guys. That's what the Celtics did, and championship teams always have 1 or 2 guys who seem way overqualified for their role because that's the role they play on a championship team. Like that's where they are maximized. So Alex Caruso, even though I think it was good for Chicago because I think Giddey's going to go in there and average like 18, 8, and 8. And if it doesn't work out long term, like they can trade him for picks. Obviously, Caruso is more valuable at OKC right now. So yeah, to keep Joe and Wiggins on awesome deals, to get Hardenstein on a deal that seems like a ton of money, but for OKC they just had the cap space, so it's a no-brainer. And to bring in Caruso, Oklahoma City looks like at least the best regular season team in the West, and they showed a lot of chops in the playoffs. It's not like the Mavs wiped the floor with them. So I don't blame anyone who has OKC as the West favorite. That's very fair at this point.
Yeah, I mean they've got a top 4 player in the league, I think, in Shea. 2 other All-Star caliber guys between J-Dub and Chet, who are both really young and could take leaps forward this year. Probably Chet is more likely to do that than J-Dub, since J-Dub just took a pretty substantial leap last year. But yeah, and then they have probably a top 2 or 3 guard defender in the league in Caruso, one of the top wing defenders in Dort. They have like an elite defender at every archetype to throw at different types of players. Like you're going against an elite guard like Fox or Brunson or Steph, you throw Caruso at them. You're going against a great forward, you throw Dort at them. If it's a more like physical forward, and then you also have J Dub to put on their second guy. Chet can switch against anyone and wall up at the rim. Hartenstein can do the same thing. and their depth is just crazy with all the young guys they've drafted over the years and the in and around the lottery. Cason Wallace, you mentioned Isaiah Joe and Aaron Wiggins. Like their team is just so deep, and Boston was the only team in the league last year that was top three in both offensive and defensive rating. I would not be surprised if OKC does that this year. They were top five in both last year, and I would not be surprised if they were top three in both this year. So, yeah, clear
Yeah.
winner. They were really close to beating that Dallas team. Like, that was a really close 6 game series. And I think they would have had a shot against Minnesota too. Like, Denver was the team they really didn't have an answer for last year, but now Denver is worse. So, they really have as good of a shot of anyone, I think, as a title contender.
Famously, they had a tough time with the Lakers as well, but
Yes.
I was going to pick the Thunder in a Lakers series if they ended up matching up, but the Lakers played them really well. And we haven't even mentioned OKC's draft. I thought Dylan Jones was a big time reach. I had him in the second half of the second round on my board. I think in the 50s, late 40s. So to take him in the 20s, I didn't love, but also I get it because he has incredible feel and craft for a guy at that weight and with the strength and the wingspan. Like I understand it. If you think a lot of the things he could do at Weber State are going to translate to the NBA, like having a first round grade on him makes perfect sense to me. I just don't really buy the shooting, and I think his skill set falls apart just a little bit if he can't be a competent 3-point shooter. But AJ Mitchell, I love, and I think he's going to be on the Thunder for 12 years and might end up closer to the inner circle of their young core than people even realize.
Yeah.
Also, you mentioned top four player in the world. There's a world where in the next month, I think it would be the next month, Canada wins gold and Shea is the best player in the tournament. And I'm open to the conversation that Shea is the second best player in the world. Like Shea has reached exit velocity as a super duper star.
Yeah.
And I'm ready for the conversation. If Canada goes really deep, if he looks like the best guy in the field, like just for the two-way stuff and a lot of the Luka whining and the overall the negatives of the Luka experience
Hmm.
and Giannis's inability to stay healthy the last couple of years, like Shea has a chance, man. Shea could have the global silver medal and the Olympic gold.
Yeah. Remind the listeners where he was on your board in 2018.
Had him at number 6.
There we
And by the
go.
way, we've got to start putting those wins in our Twitter bio. Like
Yeah.
we got to do J Dub and Shea. We've been right about the Thunder guys, and I hope
Yeah.
I hope I'm right about AJ Mitchell. Really believe in him.
Absolutely.
Okay. Two honorable mentions for winners before we get into the losers. I just want to shout out the Spurs.
Yes.
I just think the Spurs did absolutely everything right. Getting my number one guy at the 4th pick, Stefan Castle, who showed everything I love about him in Summer League. But then Rob Dillingham, who I had at number 16 on my board. At first, they pick him at 8, which had been rumored that they liked him because when you have Wembanyama vacuuming everything at the rim, you can take a small guard like that and protect him. I didn't like the fit because like why compromise your defense just because Wembanyama is going to keep you above sea level. I just have real questions about Dillingham defensively long term, but totally get all the offensive spark plug stuff. I just love that they traded him and they got top 1 protected pick swap in 2030 and a 2031 first round pick unprotected. Who knows where the Timberwolves are at in 2031? Is
Yeah.
is Anthony Edwards even on the Wolves in 2031? Like Rudy Gobert's retired. So yeah, I just this is a classic like good Spurs move. I know the Spurs haven't looked like the best managed team the last few years, but this is just a really heady move where Wembanyama, if God willing he stays healthy, is in the thick of his prime. And it's like, oops, we actually ended up with somehow we have like the 7th pick in the 2031 draft, and maybe it's a strong draft, and they add another piece,
Yeah.
and it like adds more jet fuel to what I assume will be a contender when Embiid is at, or when Victor's at the peak of his powers. Weird Freudian slip. I don't know where that came from, but
Yeah.
yeah, just all awesome moves by the Spurs. I'm a little bit worried about how these young pieces fit together, just because they've taken like 3 guys I absolutely love in Sohan, Castle, and CD Sissoko. All of them, the concern is shooting, long range shooting. So I'm worried that they can't develop alongside each other as well as I'd want them to. but individually, they're just stockpiling prospects that I truly love.
Yes. And they scooped up Chris Paul, who I think is going to be really instrumental in helping and trying to get the most out of this fit as possible. For all of NBA Twitter that was complaining about the Spurs not passing the ball to Victor Wembanyama last year, that will not be an issue this year. CP will throw, he will know every angle to get the ball to Wemby. He'll know he can throw it up to like the top corner of the square, and Wemby will just like go up and get it. He's going to be really, really good for that team. Last year, I think CP had a really underrated year last year because of how dysfunctional the Warriors were for large portions of the season, but they were consistently better with him on the court than off. And he's he's had that, I think, almost everywhere he's been. The team has won more when he's gotten there than they did before. Obviously, you'd expect San Antonio to win more regardless, but he's going to help with the fit. They scooped up Harrison Barnes for nothing out of the DeMar DeRozan swap. I think they actually got a pick. They got a pick swap from the Kings and scooped up Harrison Barnes for nothing, which is just really good business. Like, just that's how you win. You win stuff on the margins. You get a solid starter level player for them and a draft asset without having to do any work. That is really good NBA GM work. So yeah, I think they could push for a play-in spot this year. Like, I don't think that's insane, especially if Wemby progresses to the point that a lot of people think he will, and I think he will, where he's like a borderline top 15 player, and just like, he's already a borderline defensive player of the year, and the offense we saw grow so much over the course of the season already. Like, they're going to be really fun to watch for sure.
And every time we write off Chris Paul, he shows us something we aren't expecting. I don't think this is going to be like an OKC Chris Paul renaissance, but he's just one of the smartest guys to ever step on a basketball court. And I feel like he's going to be really savvy at exploiting the uniqueness of Wembanyama's skill set, like funneling drivers into Victor, the lob game, because Victor didn't have a consistent lob thrower in his rookie season. Yeah, he's going to make things easier for the big fella. So
Yeah,
big things building in San Antonio. And let's get to some losers.
let's do it.
I have the Pelicans as a loser
Hmm.
because I just don't love the DeJounte fit. And I'm skeptical of all this. DeJounte's our new leader. He's been so amazing since he got to New Orleans. I think it's close to where he's from, and like he's kind of trying to turn over a new leaf and say, don't think about my relationship going sour with Trae Young. Like I'm going to be the team captain. They've been looking for a young leader, and he clearly wants to kind of be the quarterback of this team. This just strikes me as a classic like social media team. Like, whoa, they're closing five. It's going to be DeJounte, Trey Murphy, Herb Jones, Zion, and a center. We have no idea who it will be. Maybe Yves Messi. Like, oh, that's scary hours. And I don't think it's scary hours. I think they are probably a play-in team.
Like always.
Yeah, unless and look, dude, I've been a Zion hater for years now. He has the talent to always take another step, and we are a Trey Murphy loving podcast. So there are a lot of good pieces there. Maybe CJ McCollum slots into like a great six man, microwave scorer role. I just think the Pelicans find themselves in no man's land going into two of the best drafts in recent memory. So don't love where they're headed, and don't love DeJounte Murray in general. I think he has an attitude. Like when you watch full games of DeJounte Murray, you notice some small stuff like barking at teammates, rolling his eyes when someone takes a shot he doesn't like, which I can sympathize, I guess, because playing with Trae Young is probably not always so fun. But I just think New Orleans is in a weird middle ground. They don't have a center.
That's the thing.
They let JV go, and neither of us were huge Yves Messi fans. And even if you believe Yves Messi is a starter in time, he's definitely not as a rookie. They lost Larry Nance, who is just an awesome vet to have in your big man group, and obviously Valanciunas is gone now. Interesting to see what happens with Valanciunas in the coming weeks, because I just doubt he's going to be a Wizard. There's been a lot of trade buzz. Low on the Pelicans right now.
I kind of agree, and I've been someone who's been a Pelicans optimist because I've been a Zion optimist for his entire career. But And he had an intoxicating play-in game. Like that was really the full Zion experience in that play-in game where he went toe to toe with LeBron for a large portion of it and then pulled his hamstring, wasn't able to finish the last 4 or 5 minutes of the game and they lost. And then he was out for the rest of the year. Like it's Groundhog Day over and over again with him. And yeah, the fact they don't have a center is really what worries me. Also, the whole weird Brandon Ingram thing where it was like 100% a done deal that he was not going to be a Pelican when training camp started. And then they realized they actually couldn't trade him and the value was not there. So now they're like, oh, Brandon Ingram, you're back. Uh, and it's just a lot of guys who need the ball between DeJounte, Ingram, and Zion. CJ is going to be in there somehow. I don't know if they're planning on starting both DeJounte and CJ because then it's like four guys who need the ball, and I really don't like that fit. Plus, you have this ready-made elite wing duo, or not elite, but like really ready-made high-level wing duo, and Trey Murphy and Herb Jones that you need to give some oxygen to. So I don't know. Zion at the five has not worked throughout his career. He's not good enough as a backline defender. He's not good enough as a rebounder. He's going to need to take major strides in those two areas this year, along with just general health. So I agree. I'm a little leaves a sour
Lukewarm.
taste in my lukewarm. Yeah, lukewarm with how their offseason has gone.
Yep. Okay. Timberwolves on the flip side of that Spurs trade. You better hope you're really good in 2030 and 31. I don't
Mm-hmm.
think I know Rob Dillingham's highlights are intoxicating, and I know NBA defenders, even at the highest level, are going to struggle to stay in front of him. And I think he has a chance to be an awesome sixth man in time. It's just, a pick swap and an unprotected first is a lot. It's a lot from like a guy that I had as the 16th best player in a weak draft. So,
Yeah.
and especially because Minnesota, that like they have nothing left really in the picks department to trade. So you're really now locking yourself in to this current construction. And hey, there were several days of the playoffs this year where they looked like the best team in the NBA. So they're going to be in the mix, but I just think this was too short sighted for my liking.
Yep. All right, let's do maybe a couple more losers and then get out of here just so we don't go for like too
Oh
long.
yeah, yeah, yeah. Quickly, did you have Nuggets in your
Yes,
losers?
I
Yeah,
want to talk about Nuggets. I think last year they lost their chance to repeat when they let Bruce Brown and Jeff Green go, and their young guys could not fill that void. I think that's why they lost to Minnesota in large part. And now they've lost an even more important piece in KCP. Christian Brown proved, I think, that he couldn't quite fill the Bruce Brown role, and now they're going to ask him to fill the KCP role, and they're going to have someone else try to fill the Bruce Brown role, whether that's Russell Westbrook, which was a really weird pickup. Like I couldn't think of a basketball player more antithetical to the Jokic style of play than Russell Westbrook. But hey, maybe he gets going on some short rolls to the hoop and cuts, but he has to lean into like Houston Rockets Russ, which he didn't seem very happy doing. So I don't get it. I don't know if there's a more unproven playoff bench in the league than Westbrook, Strother, Peyton Watson, Vlatko Chanchar, Dario Saric. Like that's got to be one
yeah,
of the. And they had a bad bench last year, and they had a bad bench the year they won the title. But I just when you have a guy who's on track to be one of the 10 to 15 best players ever in Jokic, you need to go all out to retain like your rotation. Look what the Celtics did. They brought back everyone. They're paying a massive luxury tax bill so that they can pay Sam Hauser 11 million a year over the next 4 or 5 years. Like that's what you do when you have a team that's capable of winning it. And the Nuggets, when they won, they did so in dominant fashion. They looked like they might be able to open up a window where they could win, three of the next five championships or something like that. And they're just hemorrhaging depth and really are going to need to test the degree to which Jokic can buoy like a subpar supporting cast because that's kind of what it's starting to turn into.
yeah. I think they're paying a price for that MPJ deal. I think they jumped the gun a little bit on giving MPJ all that money.
Good point.
He's making 36 million this coming season, 38 in 2 years, and 41 in 26, 27. I knocked the Knicks for keeping Julius Randle this long and trying, like not getting off that money. I think it's a bigger deal in Denver because I just Michael Porter Jr. is a sure thing shooter, but I just don't like his lack of other stuff. Um, and I'd just much rather have KCP than Michael Porter Jr. on my playoff team. That's for sure. I'm giving myself a little pat on the back because there was a moment, I can't remember if it was during Nuggets Wolves or Nuggets Lakers, that I said, Denver better put their foot on the gas and repeat right now because windows close quickly. And the KCP money was already in doubt. Like it was clear they were going to struggle to keep him. And I said on the podcast, Julian Strawther might be their starting shooting guard next year. And there are a lot of Strawther believers. I'm not one of them personally, but I also think he's developed a lot since I evaluated him as a Gonzaga wing. So I'm not writing him off. Like, you got to give some guys a fresh start when they get to the league. But it's just unlikely that he's going to be an above average starter or sixth man or seventh man, whatever he is, this early in his career. But he can shoot and he's a big body. Obviously, the Deron Holmes injury is a huge deal for them. That's sad. I think we both like that pick for them. He
Yeah.
fits their roster well. And obviously now he's at least a year away from playing his first real game as a Nugget. So yeah, it's just, I understand still having Denver as your favorite in the West because they have the best player in the world. I'm not there. I think they have a chance to make a deep run if everyone's healthy, which is a big if, especially now that a lot more regular season workload falls on the shoulders of Jokic and Murray. It's a lot more shallow than it looked a couple of years ago or even last year.
Yeah, they didn't solve the problem that they can't guard Anthony Edwards. I don't think they can guard Luca. And they really their best path to winning was just being such an elite, unguardable offense. But when you take out KCP and replace him with someone in Christian Brown who has decent numbers from three, but teams don't guard him like he's a knockdown shooter, it makes your team more guardable. You can take a guy off of Christian Brown and have him kind of muck up the Murray Jokic two-man game, and it's not as unguardable of an action as it was before when you only
Yeah.
really have to worry about one shooter out of that in MPJ and not two. So yeah,
I'm sure the Dario Saric hive will say he can add something to the rotation, which I believe. Like I
maybe.
like Dario Saric. Trey Alexander's a name to watch in Denver. The rookie out of Creighton has just played really well in summer league and has a chance. Like it's a land of opportunity right now at the bottom of the Denver rotation. Like Jalen Pickett has a chance. Peyton Watson has a chance to take a leap. In fact, they better be hoping,
Yeah.
Peyton Watson takes a step because he has just more minutes for the taking now. Interesting times in Denver. And if you're going to be optimistic, just remind yourself that Anthony Davis, who's looked like the best defender on planet Earth, couldn't do shit against Nikola Jokic in round one of the playoffs this year. Like Jokic made him look like a very small, helpless man.
Yes.
And now there isn't a single guy who can score in the paint against Davis in Olympic exhibitions, or pre-Olympic games. So yeah, Jokic still has the crown in my mind, and that's enough to be optimistic about your team.
For sure. Real quickly, the Clippers, they lose Paul George for nothing.
Yep.
They did bring Batum back, which is nice, but
What the hell are they doing?
where are they going? What's their plan? They have no plan.
Okay, they bring in Mo Bamba, Nick Batum, Derek Jones Jr., Kevin Porter Jr., Chris Dunn. Like I really like Batum, Derek Jones, and Chris Dunn. Like those are really nice vets to add to a team with winning aspirations. I just this all this stuff about how they wouldn't offer the fourth year to Paul George, it just makes no sense to me. Like sign him and trade him if you're pissed off at him. You're not going to give him a no trade clause. Like give him the money and someone will trade for him. Like there will be a trade suitor. Paul George was still that good this year,
Yeah.
and they signed James Harden, who's objectively worse than Paul George,
Yeah.
and is not a guy that you pay for a team that's trying to lose. Obviously, they still have Kawhi. I have the Clippers as a loser too because it feels like they're just in a weird middle ground right now, and I think everyone agrees on that. But I'll give them the benefit of the doubt and say it's a wait and see. Losing Paul George for nothing is objectively a devastating loss. You just you needed to get something back for him if you weren't retaining him. Maybe they trade Harden, maybe they trade Kawhi, and maybe they're really building from the ground up. But these veteran signings are like guys you bring into a team that's trying to make a playoff run. So I don't know, man. Maybe Bomber has something up his sleeve.
Yep. By the way, there's still an unprotected first rounder in 2026 going from the Clippers to the Thunder as part of that Paul George trade initially. Um,
It's scary. It's if you're like a really competent veteran on the Thunder right now, you're just getting pushed out. You're getting gentrified by these rookie contracts. It's unbelievable. And it's an amazing formula that Presti has. Like we're gonna have our top end talent, and we're just gonna have a bunch of rookie deals, guys that are ready to play early. They've been taking like really polished college vets, and yeah, and then the picks just can continue to come in.
I mean, and Kawhi couldn't even make it through USA camp. Like, what's their plan when he misses 20 games this year? It's just Harden and a bunch of role guys who some of them are just like one way guys. Like,
Yeah.
it's hard to see them as much more than a play-in team. And Kawhi made it through a lot of the year last year. He looked amazing. He's a top five player when he's healthy. He was absolutely like incredible through the regular season. I don't know if he made an All NBA team, but I think he did make an All NBA team, and he looked really good in the playoffs. And then he was out, and they never really said what his issue was. But he was back at Team USA camp, and then he was gone, and it wasn't clear if that was Kawhi's decision or the Clippers' decision or if the USA basketball's decision. But the fact that he couldn't even make it through Team USA camp, like I don't see what the vision is, and yeah, they're very much in danger of missing the playoffs, and it seems like they don't want to commit to the full tank, partially as like a saving face thing, partially because they're going into this new arena, which I just cannot stop seeing content on my Twitter feed of how sick this new arena is, but the team that goes into it probably won't be as sick.
Yeah. And this is a team also that still has Norman Powell, still has Terrence Mann, still has Ivica Zubats. They have winning players. And I'd bet on Ty Lue getting a lot of wins out of this current construction, but there's a ceiling. Like they're not going to win 50 games. Ty Lue is so good, they might win 45 out of nowhere. Like Kawhi gets healthy. We got good James Harden. I'm skeptical, but maybe it happens.
Do you have another loser? I've got one more.
No, all you.
My last one is the Miami Heat. They lost Caleb Martin, which, you know, is just like a rotation player out the door. And it seems like it was kind of like a breakdown in negotiations where they didn't, like, their initial offer kind of insulted him. And then they had the chance to match what Philly, or they could have matched what Philly did. Like, they had the financial wherewithal to match what Philly did, but he didn't even like give them the chance to do it. And then he went to Philly and immediately started talking about how he loves being a part of a culture, which seemed like kind of a subtweet at the Heat. Um, so that wasn't great. And then there was the weird kind of like Jimmy contract stuff where they didn't agree to an extension, and it's not exactly clear what his future is going to be on the team beyond this season. They didn't really bring in anyone. I didn't love their draft. We talked about Khalil Ware at the top. He seems like the opposite of a Heat culture player to me, but you know he did look really good in summer league, so maybe I'm wrong. Um,
I do like
well,
Keyshawn Johnson though. I
yeah,
really like they got Keyshawn Johnson undrafted. I had him at 47, and he's just one of the best athletes on planet Earth and plays his ass off on defense. His offensive ceiling's pretty low. The shooting is a question mark, but he's made a few threes in summer league. He's not going to like move the needle in a major way. And I agree with you. The Ware pick was a real head scratcher. But the same way that I've heard people propose the idea of Trae Young to Miami because they just have all that culture, and maybe you can take in a guy like that whose competitiveness has been questioned, at least defensively. I maybe that's the philosophy. Like we are the team that can get the most out of Khalil Ware's like very rare tools. But I agree with you. Definitely a slight loser in my book, but not enough that I had them on the list, in part because they were already kind of in no man's land last year as a team that was in no way ready to compete in the playoffs. Although I say that and remind myself that with healthy Jimmy, like all bets are off with Miami. So
yeah, and they'll be back in the play-in mix, probably somewhere between a 6 and 8 seed again. But you know, they struck out on Dame. It seemed like they were really counting on getting him. There was a lot of noise about them with Donovan Mitchell, but then he re-upped in Cleveland. You know, they weren't. I didn't even hear anything about them in terms of Paul George. I don't even know if they could have financially made that work. But yeah, I just don't see what the vision is exactly. Pat Riley's getting older. He's not going to want to go into like another tank. The good thing is they have Bam, and he's hitting threes for Team USA and generally looking amazing. So like
yeah.
that's what they have going for them. But yeah, it's especially with how the top of the East really got a lot stronger this offseason. The Knicks, the Sixers got stronger, and then Milwaukee probably maintained or got like marginally better. Orlando got better. Indy got better during the season last year. Cleveland got a new coach. Like it's hard to see exactly where they fit in the East.
And you know what, dude? even as you say this, I'm just thinking they're gonna make us look so stupid again. Terry Rozier is gonna go back to being Hornets Terry Rozier. Jimmy's gonna be healthy somehow. Nikola Jovic is gonna take a massive step.
Yep.
Bam is gonna continue to add to his offensive game. Uh,
Jaquez.
who the yeah, Hawkes is gonna become like a fringe all-star. Who the hell knows? It's just all bets are off with this team, and maybe they steal another Terry Rozier type guy midseason, and suddenly the Heat are once again like the last team you want to see, because they'll be like a 6 or a 7 seed, and they're like a 2 seed's worst nightmare.
Yeah,
So
they're destined to
who
upset
knows?
Philly. Destined to upset Philly.
Oh my God. Yeah, there are definitely some listeners that are excited thinking about that possibility.
That's all I got.
All right, sweet. We'll be back soon. Peace.